Test, 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 test. Testing, 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 testing. Text your mother. It's Mother's Day. Text your mother. Please. Tell her that you love her. Because people don't live long and we live fragile, short lives. Do something meaningful and tell your mother that you love her. Alrighty. Well, actually, this video is going to come out after Mother's Day. Nah, you should still text your mother anyway. No matter what time you're viewing this, text your mother. Check in with her. We're doing it again. We're making another video. Woo! Yay! I sync the camera's audio with the microphone in real time. I don't need to clap to sync it in post. But I like doing it anyway. Okay. Hello there. My name's Beano, and today I'm going to teach you how to record vocals. Now, recording vocals is quite a difficult matter in regards to a lot of other instruments and situations that you'll come across when, in the studio environment. The reason why vocals are particularly difficult is that every singer is their own unique problem, and having to deal with those problems is, something that just comes from natural experience, figuring out, polarity patterns and dynamic versus condenser microphones, microphone distance. All of these things come into play whenever dealing with whatever singer that you have. So whenever I do these examples, whenever I'm going to be doing a microphone shootout with all the mics behind me, something to take into consideration is my voice. Because I'm a very particular singer, I suck. And choosing whichever microphone sounds best on me is going to be a matter of preference for you. I want you to be able to listen to all of these all of the samples and stuff that we record, and compare yourself. Figure out all the nuances and differences and which, microphones sound flattering to me and the particular performance that I'm giving versus other microphones. I guess I'm just going to try to, go through this little script right here and figure out, what stuff to talk about. Let's talk about live vocals versus the studio. So, there's a big difference between whenever you're choosing a microphone for live vocals versus studio vocals. Now, with live vocals and recording live vocalist, whether you're in a like on stage in a big auditorium, venue, whatever, or if you're just all tracking an entire band in the same room, whatever. Something that you have to take in consideration, especially with stage stuff, is feedback. Making sure that you have microphones that are good at rejecting feedback and background audio and stuff going around. Dynamic microphones, especially stuff designed for stage work, are going to be where like certain microphones like an SM58 or a Sennheiser 441 or whatever that are designed for these situations are going to shine more than in the studio environment. But even if you're like doing live vocals within a studio, like with a band all in the same room, something that is important to consider though is a polarity pattern. So if you have a microphone that has a cardioid pattern, you're going to get, it's just the information from the microphone, like in a nice little like sort of like spread like 180 degrees or like 90 degrees or something like that, like right in front of the capsule. And it's not a particularly tight polarity pattern. There's still going to be stuff that, is going to be picked up from the left and right of the singer. However, though, there's a lot of rejection from the back. Now, in comparison to, let's say, like a hypercardioid pattern, that one is an even more narrow, polarity pattern. And I think it goes to, I think it's like a cardioid, supercardioid, and then hypercardioid, where hypercardioid's like a laser, it really focuses it on what's right directly in front of it. And the tighter the polarity pattern, the more rejection you're going to get from the outside room. So if you're recording vocals with a band all in the same place, choosing microphones like the Sennheiser 441, which is a hypercardioid or supercardioid, can't remember which one. Microphones like that are going to be much more beneficial. Then let's say something like a Shure SM7B. I know that's a very popular microphone for live studio stuff, though. However, I'm not too thrilled with that microphone in live studio usage. My practice is that because of the greater bleed that comes from that microphone, you can end up in situations where you're recording a vocalist and you want to turn up an EQ or like high shelf EQ or something like that, just to make it a little more brighter, help with the pronunciation and the articulation of the words. And when you do that and you boost those higher frequencies on that vocal mic, you're also bringing up the bleed from the drum kit. So you're bringing up a shittier sounding hi-hat and cymbal sounds into that vocal mic. And as a result, it can just be a hard balance trying to figure out, a good compromise between the sound of the vocal mic and trying to negate the bleed from the drum kit. And figuring out good microphones that not only have a lot of rejection from general room tone, but also have pleasing bleed or pleasing off-axis sound can sometimes be kind of hard. And which is why a lot of times, sometimes people will even opt into using condenser microphones in the live, in like a live studio environment, just because the bleed's nicer. A really good compromise that I found in that territory is the Sennheiser 441. It's a really expensive dynamic microphone, but I find that it's very bright, the off-axis sound is good, and there's a lot of rejection from the sides. So that's a really good choice that I recommend for live studio stuff. Another important thing to hone in on for vocals is the the kind of microphone. The difference between dynamic, condenser, and ribbon microphones for vocals. Now, with dynamic microphones, though, they don't require any phantom power or any 48 volt. So you could just plug it into a preamp, you're good to go. With dynamic microphones, at least usually, they require a little bit more juice, especially with vocals, to get a good take. Like some really infamous gain-hungry microphones that are also really good on vocals. The Electro Voice RE20 and the Shure SM7B are particularly gain-hungry, and which is why for vocals, I usually recommend people just to use a cloud booster. I think it's called this cloud lifter. It basically allows you to use 48 volt on whatever dynamic microphone you have, so you don't have to push the preamp as hard. And this is really good, especially if you have particularly cheap preamps or even just a very colored preamp, because as you start to push the gain on a preamp, the preamp starts to become a more exaggerated version of itself. Like, for instance, a lot of times with like, I think Neves have this problem as well. Sometimes it could be for the a benefit, sometimes it could be a good thing. Whenever you start to crank like a 1073 or something like that, the bass ends up just becoming super bloated and distorted and just starts breaking apart, and the high end is like super shrill and just bright, and sometimes this doesn't really pair with microphones quite well. But sometimes that could actually complement a microphone, I tend to find that at least a lot of entry-level preamps don't like being pushed too hard. So when situations like this arise, though, I recommend people just to get, a cloud booster, cloud lifter, whatever the fuck it's called. Now, compare that difference to a condenser microphone. Is that a fucking plane? Get out of here! Scram! Another something to consider is condenser microphones. Now, condenser microphones are usually what I recommend people to get for vocals, but it depends on the context, because I think there are a lot of musical and really nice sounding dynamic microphones. Like, like I would recommend like Sennheiser 441, Electro Voice RE20, Shure SM7B. I think these are really good options for vocals. However, though, especially in certain contexts, that extra kind of mid-range or upper mid-range clarity and presence is pretty important, especially for vocals, especially if you're trying to make out the articulation of the words, where the dialogue is very important. I wouldn't ever recommend using those microphones, possibly on something like hip hop or rap, depending on how aggressive the vocalist is. If they really like to choke up on the microphone, they get really aggressive with it, then that's probably more applicable to using dynamic microphone. But with hip hop though, the clarity and the actual words themselves are very important to capture and like all their detail and stuff. Like for most music, the voice is like the frontmost like center thing that people care about though. But with hip hop though, it's that, but even more so. It's pushed to even more of an extreme. So for those things, I usually recommend people get like condenser microphones for that. And also especially for if you're recording vocals for podcast or streaming or something like that. I also recommend condenser microphones in that regard. Some good entry level condenser microphones for vocals are like something like the look at any of the large diaphragm entry level microphones from Audio Technica or Neumann as well. So I get sometimes kind of mad at Neumann for not being up to the standard of what they used to be, though. However, though, them as well as all the other pro audio companies just have shifted their degree of pedigree to a more sort of consumer prosumer kind of market, because there's more money to be made, advertising and gearing products towards either amateur hobbyists or wannabe musicians versus like high-end studios. So as a result, this particular price range is something that like people really prioritize. Trying to get people just aren't really in the market for like a $5 or $6 microphone. Nobody really wants to spend that money. So as a result, Neumann has been trying to push out and get a lot of like really good $800,000 microphones out there. And to be fair, for what they are, they sound really good. There's a very specific quality with Neumann microphones, especially with like vocals and stuff, that I find particularly exciting. This sort of gritty mid-range character that has this sort of like sandpaper quality. It seems to almost like accentuate the like vocal modulations, like the sort of like vocal cord kind of like back and forth oscillating really fast, kind of guttural quality to it. It has a tendency to exaggerate that, and I feel it has this almost hyper real attention to detail that I think sounds really good for vocals. And the entry level Audio Technica stuff though, I think is particularly good too. And for vocals, I also recommend large diaphragm microphones. Now, you can get some good sounds with small diaphragm stuff, but this is a bit in the wine tasting sort of section for taste of microphones. I think large diaphragm microphones just have a tendency to capture much more complex sounds or arrangements a lot more faithfully. This is gonna sound again really weird, but for really specific things like the low end presence and the ability to capture the low end with a larger diaphragm capsule on the microphone, I think has a tendency to make the vocals sound much more true to life. And for like miking symphonies and orchestral bullshit, or like room mics or things where you have to capture large complex arrangements, I also feel like large diaphragm microphones tend to sound better in that regard. But again, it's not like a set rule and thumb. There's still tons of perfectly fine uses for small diaphragm stuff though. But vocals, I just tend to get people to recommend. I tend to recommend people get large diaphragm microphones. But bleh. Past the normal conventional methods of microphones though, ribbon microphones. ribbon microphones have been kind of making a comeback, you know? It's an oldie but a goodie, vintage even, where, uh, it's a ribbon. So it's just literally a stupid fucking piece of metal that just like, you know, sound hits it and just oscillates back and forth, you know? Like it's a pretty archaic and simple way. It just kind of moves back and forth like that, you know? It's a pretty simple and archaic way to capture sound though, but we really haven't evolved too much past that. Because I mean, like literally, like music moving through wire is just all it is just the signal capturing a positive and negative oscillation, just the sound wave going back and forth. And literally the same way that a microphone capsule, like the capsule of a microphone, whenever sound hits it, it moves back and forth. That exact oscillation or that exact movement is the same movement that happens in your speakers. Because like that's what your speakers do. Your speakers are just literally a cone that just goes back and forth. Just like that. Just that oscillates and moves the air and causes those movements in the air to make music. It's fucking insane if you think about it. But funny enough though, we haven't moved too far past that. Like we are still like, it's been like 100 years or like close to 100 years. And we still haven't figured out a more complex way of listening to music than just speakers oscillating back and forth, which is pretty crazy. And again, some of the more abstract bullshit, I think there's something to be had with capturing things in a sort of hyper-real environment. There's a really interesting forum post on Klaus Heinz forum where I think it's like somewhere on like Pro Sound Web where it talks about hyper realism in capturing capturing sound, and the argument is that like certain microphones, like let's say like a U47 has a really exaggerated low end and a really exaggerated high end that was meant for far miking, was meant for miking things far away. Because as you move farther away from a sound source, the low frequencies and the high frequencies tend to be lost as the source of the audio gets farther away from the microphone. So to compensate for that, it has an exaggerated low end and high end. And but however, vocalists found that actually misusing this microphone to get closer in, that exaggerates the low end and high end of their vocal, actually gave it a sort of hyper-real sound. And as a result, when you listen to a lot of, like, especially like a lot of like old recordings, like a great example is like, look at some like Nat King Cole recordings or some tracks from him, and you could see the perfect pairing between like his guttural vocal correlation, like his sort of like guttural vocal quality being matched perfectly with like the U47, and it creates this super real and present and just like this feeling of that he's just right there, like hiding behind your speakers, just like singing to you. And I think it's a really interesting quality. And I guess the sort of hypothesis to why we like this hyper realistic way of recording things instead of like more accurate or more flat sounding microphones, which don't even get me fucking started on that argument. It doesn't even exist. Like, neutral, like a flat neutral sounding microphone, like that doesn't exaggerate any frequencies unnaturally. It's like, it's not conducive to like anything that sounds good, Like you can you can show me those microphones. Like people have made like Neumann binaural heads that are like, they get a fake dummy head and put microphones in the ears, and it's supposed to replicate perfectly like human hearing and stuff. And if you ever listen to those recordings, they don't fucking sound like human hearing. Unfortunately, a lot of the complex ways that we listen to sound come from psychoacoustic bullshit. The way that our stupid meat brain and our emotions actually change the ways that we hear sound. There's actually a really good, funny experiment conducted by a university where they had a video example of something where it was like, they had like they told the people doing the like listening to or like watching a video. Yeah, it was watching a video and some audio played at the same time. Oh my god, that's what a fucking video is. So in this video test that they were conducting, there are going to be three examples of three different video clips playing, and one after the other. And they told the audience, or the people being tested on, to say that which video clips did the person say ba or fa, like the different syllables, ba fa, like that. And it showed clip from clip, person saying ba fa ba fa, and there's an exaggerated lip movement that fa that it has, so they thought that okay, this one says ba and this one says fa and whatever. And the results were all over the place. Some people said ba, some people said fa, whatever. And at the end, they tell all the testers, none of the audio clips ever said the phrase fa. They just had the person in front of the camera mimicking the phonetic sound of, like, with your lips, fa, while actual recording of him saying ba was playing. But to them, though, they heard fa. And they're not wrong necessarily. Like, again, there's so much stuff that our brain does to screw around with our hearing of like how we hear and perceive sound. Also, a great example is, like, if you're in a room for a certain amount of time, like right when you walk into a room, you can hear the ambience of the room. You can hear all the reverberations, how loud it is in there, and you can hear things like the air conditioner sound, But as you start to, like, be in there for a certain amount of time, your ears start to naturally tune those sounds out. You start to not hear the air conditioner anymore. And the tone and the reverberations of the room, you start not to hear it anymore. That's also a great reason why whenever you put up mics in a room and you think it sounds good and you go back to a different room and listen back to that recording, you hear all the reverberations and the reverb that you never heard before, and it could screw up with your brain. But it's just, our brain is just kind of screwy like that, Sometimes we just don't hear sound correctly. Something just never will be able to replicate it with, like, microphones, Unless you start, like, getting microphones and hooking them up to, like, brains or whatever, you're never going to be able to, like, faithfully capture what we actually hear in real life. So it's a stupid goal to ever, like, aspire to anyway. Instead, just try to record what sounds good. And I apologize that rant went way fucking off. But the talk was that, but back to the hyper-realistic thing, that since we listen to things in such an archaic way, like, we haven't made a new discovery in how to listen to sound in the past 100 years, it's just all bigger or smaller speakers moving back and forth. And as a result, from that archaic, primitive, and restricted way of listening to audio, that hyper-realistic recordings actually compensate for that. They make up for that lack of speaker, like the lack of, like, nuance and sophistication in our listening setup, and they complement each other. The hyper-realism and the sort of faltered or lacking way that we reproduce that sound complement each other in a way that creates a very real and present sound. And I think that's something I like to think about a lot whenever I'm recording stuff. And I think it's very applicable with vocals, since they're such a front and center thing with music that's important to capture them very faithfully. Now, what does this have to do with, back to the old part of the rant, ribbon microphones? Ribbon microphones, I think in general, sound a lot more neutral, less exaggerative than condenser microphones, and this could be to your benefit. I like ribbon microphones a lot with like electric guitar cabinets or drums or something like that, especially if you're trying to not accentuate a lot of the transient or very, like, bright sound of the recording. Like, for instance, if you have a really harsh or shrill like guitar, like a very squeaky or kind of like nasty sounding like mandolin or something like that, or even just electric guitars that just have too much high frequency information that are really harsh and bright, or even just like really bright cymbals. I think that can be really good to getting a very neutral sound that doesn't exaggerate a lot of those qualities that would probably sound bad with a condenser microphone. With vocals, though, I usually sometimes don't, and especially with ribbon microphones. If your microphone is not designed to be used for vocals, you have the fear of blowing out your ribbon microphone. If you don't like, especially if you don't have a pop filter. But with ribbon microphones, they're very fragile. Any big puff of air is very susceptible to destroying the microphone. So you have to be very careful, even with vocalists and stuff, or even with microphones designed to be used for vocals with ribbon microphones. So you have to be very careful of that. But I think that situationally, a lot of times, you just may encounter certain singers that sound better with ribbon microphones. You may find that just because of like the very neutral low end, or the non-exaggerative parts of the ribbon microphone may just sound really good with a vocalist. Especially if it's like maybe an old style kind of crooner voice, someone who's trying to get a sort of Frank Sinatra kind of vibe may handle ribbon microphones a lot better. So it's just something to be considerate of. A really good ribbon microphone option that I think is really cool if people want to start getting into using ribbon microphones is the AEA N8 microphone. It's a mono version of the it's a really popular ribbon microphone. The AEA R88, that's it. Where it's like a stereo microphone. The AEA N8 is a mono version of that, but it also has a transformer in it. So it has 48 volt on it, and has a hotter output than the AEA R88. It'd be really helpful for preamps that don't have a lot of gain on them, because ribbon microphones are very gain hungry. So this one doesn't have that problem. And also just because of the transformer in it, I think it interfaces with preamps a lot better than most ribbon microphones, because ribbon microphones kind of notoriously take on the sins of whatever preamp that they're coupled with. So if you don't have a good sounding preamp, it won't really get a good sound out of it. However, with it being transformer coupled, I think it performs a lot more consistently from preamp to preamp. So it's one I usually recommend people to get if they're just trying to start out getting into ribbon microphones. Let's consult the script. Okay, here's one. Miking distance. So, you got your vocals, whatever, blah, 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 you're setting up the microphones. How far do you set up the microphone? Well, it depends on the microphone. If I ever see anyone do a fucking microphone shootout and the microphones are at the exact same distance as every single other microphone, I will beat you over the head with a club. I will clobber you into the pavement, all right? Never, ever, ever do this. Well, okay, so, you have your vocalist set up, and you're now wondering how far should the mics be from the vocalist. Well, it depends on the microphone. Every microphone has its sweet spot. Every microphone has a place where it's going to be most flattering to whatever thing that you're recording. And one of the reasons why I think that mic technique is so much more important than the actual microphones themselves, because the wrong microphone in the right place can sound good. However, a good microphone in a unflattering place will always sound bad. So, learning where to place the microphone with any specific microphone is really important. It's one of the reasons why microphones that are designed for live vocal use are usually sound much more flattering, up close, because, they're particularly designed for people to be kind of, right up on it. Whereas certain, like, condenser microphones are meant to be, are meant to be sung in from far away. Like, it's something that, like, we all intuitively agree on. Like, you wouldn't, like, mic up a vocalist with an SM58 the same place that you would mic up a vocalist with, like, a U47, We obviously understand that. So please, for the love of God, don't put your stupid fucking microphone shootouts right at the same place. It's also the reason why whenever I'm doing my shootout, I'm going to be closer or farther away, depending on what sounds best on the microphone. But in regards to microphone placement, outside of that consideration, though, I tend not to worry about it too much. My first instinct is always to just, with those considerations in mind, I let the vocalist move the microphone to whatever is more comfortable for them. Usually, if it's a microphone that I want them to kind of be a little bit farther away from, I'll use the pop filter as a sort of like almost a barrier, as like a sort of like, like don't extend past this part, so that, just stop them from kind of like, choking up on the microphone and such. But outside of that, though, I just let them, move the microphone to whatever sounds more comfortable for them. Usually for a lot of vocalists, especially a lot of amateur vocalists, the comfort part is super, super important for getting a good vocal. Which is also why, especially for a lot of inexperienced singers, I may not even opt into doing a vocal mic shootout. While I do think it's another fucking plane. Can you believe it? It's like you guys gotta go somewhere. Also, one of the reasons why for amateur vocalist, I usually won't opt in to do a mic shootout because the task of figuring out whatever microphone sounds best on another person can be kind of time laborious and can make the singer feel a little uncomfortable or just, you may wear them out too soon, So it's usually something that I don't, it's a goose. Stop it, goose! Ah! Fucking goose. It's one of the reasons why for a lot of like amateur vocalists, what I'll usually do is just think of whatever, I'll have them like, like usually when it comes to like vocal, like when it usually comes to like amateur vocalists, I'll just, take a guess at what I think is a good microphone. I'll just put it up there. And unless it sounds super unflattering or terrible, I'll just, keep that choice because having to do that and, just having that up there and dealing with it after the fact can lead to a lot better vocal than like, being like, walking into the tracking room being like, hey, so, hold on a second though, the vocal sounds like shit. I'm just going to change the microphone, that can make them feel very self-conscious. So a lot of times I just won't even bother with the microphone shootout. But if you can and you have the opportunity, I do recommend it. Because again, every single singer is their own unique problem. So, some vocalists like to choke up on the microphone. Some vocalists maybe are, moving around a lot whenever they do their vocal delivery. So maybe an omnidirectional polarity pattern might be more beneficial to that. Maybe have a vocalist who likes to stomp their foot around or just like, whatever. Or maybe have a vocalist have very large dynamics in their performance as well. So, these are all things that should be considered when choosing a vocal microphone. So, being able to choose which one sounds the best on them is a really important thing. What's the script say? Sibilance. Hey, that's a good rant. Microphone sibilance. Some microphones are more sibilant than others. Rant about modern condenser microphones, blah, blah. Unfortunately, a lot of modern microphones are just too fucking sibilant. Conspiracy theory for like for instance, Neumann is a great example of why they happen to over-tighten their capsules and result in a lot of mid-harsh frequencies and are just too tight, is that, people don't hand-tune capsules anymore for their microphones. They just have a machine fucking do it. And maybe it's just more consistent. You get a more consistent performance by over-tightening the microphone or over-tightening the microphone capsule than just tuning it by hand. I have no fucking idea. Either way, though, it's quite annoying. And this is not a problem that specifically happens with Neumann, but it's a problem that I feel like plagues so many modern condenser microphones, is that they're all way too fucking sibilant. And what's sibilant? I'll probably be able to do it right now. It's the sort of sound that is like there's a certain frequency around like 3 to 5, like 4.5, 4, around that area. In that area where microphones tend to exaggerate that certain frequency spectrum. And right there is exactly where a lot of vocalists do their SE kind of sounds. So, for instance, like maybe I can kind of show you guys right here. Sibilance. that the S's, the S sound, gets boosted way higher than it should be in any normal like recording environment, you know? Because like when you listen to people when they do their S sounds, it's not that loud. But microphones, a lot of vocal microphones, have a tendency to exaggerate that frequency. So helping mitigate sibilance is a really important thing. A lot of like really good, nice sounding classic vocal microphones of yield and times don't have that bad of problems of sibilance, just mostly just because back when they were making those microphones, they kind of gave a shit. Nowadays, a lot of them are very sibilant. So having to control that, or even to take that into account when choosing microphones, if you have a very sibilant singer, is really important. For me, though, I have the exact opposite problem. I don't pronounce my words enough, and I have a tendency to slur them together. So for me, that extra high frequency information is really important to capture the clarity of my vocals. Whereas for other people, it might be too much. And it's important that, you either use a de-esser or a multiband compressor or even EQ at that certain frequency to make sure that, the vocalist sounds good and natural and blah, blah, so something also to take into consideration when recording vocals. Blech. What's the script? What's the script? You know what? Screw the script. I don't need you! I don't need you, Samantha! Ah! I never needed you, Samantha! Ah! Also, okay, here's another one. Tracking for compressors and stuff like that. Vocals they're really the only instrument that you need to compress on. There's just too much of a dynamic range with vocals to just be able to record them neutrally. A little bit of compression is just necessary when recording vocals. My favorite kind of tracking compressors when doing this, I tend to find that sort of optocell style compressors, ones that have like auto attack and release times, I think tend to sound the best with tracking vocals. Because I tend to find that whenever I record vocals and I have like, maybe some 1176 style compressor or this or that good style compressor where I have to manually adjust the attack and release times, almost without fail, every single time I do that, when I get to the mixing phase of said project, I will have wished that I never compressed the vocal and I wish I could change it. It happens all the goddamn time, which is usually why I don't try to compress things when I'm in the tracking phase, I only do the things that are absolutely necessary, like kick drum and bass guitar and vocals are the only things I compress when tracking. And with vocals, especially vocals, because they're very delicate, the only thing I tend to seem to like is these sort of like auto release settings of like optocell style compressors. So this is like LA2A style compressors or Tube Tech CO1B is a modern example. Those kind of style compressors. There's a lot of clones out there that people make of like LA2A style clones, and it's also a popular setting that's just in a lot of like built-in compressors like the Distress or whatever, or it's like a sort of auto setting. They're usually modeled after that. So those are the only ones that I tend to like during tracking. That seems to be the only one I can kind of stand. Oh, another one. Here's another one that I see of quite often with recording vocals. The microphone being hanging down or hanging up. Now, there's a couple of myths here that I wanted to spell, or actually maybe just one. One of them is that if you have a tube microphone, you need to hang your microphone down so that way the heat that's dispersed from the tube inside the microphone doesn't heat up the capsule and cause it to perform inconsistently or to change in its tonality. This is a myth. This is false, and this does not happen. I think there's maybe, I'll look it up after this video, after I'm done shooting this video. I think there's maybe one possible instance where it's like PVC capsules, and specifically the U47 or like older model U47s maybe could have this problem, but I think it's it's a nil-none problem. It's not something that you have to think about. I mean, these are literally components made of fucking metal. The heat that would have to be dispersed from these microphones would have to be insanely hot to like melt anything going on in there, you know? So you don't ever have to worry about that whenever you have a tube microphone and miking up a vocalist. However, the option to hang the microphone up or down, um, honestly, it's up to the producer. I don't think there's a meaningful difference between the sound of it, you know, recording vocals, just, you know, normal, straight down or straight up. I usually just do mine straight down because it's easier. You know, there is an argument if you have it hanging up though, which is that the vocal is having to sing upwards, having to like look up a little bit, helps their diaphragm and can help them give a better vocal delivery. But I think it's sometimes a little uncomfortable for a lot of singers, especially for a lot of singers when they're used to like singing down and stuff. So I usually just keep it straight on in the middle, just kind of out of comfort. But you know, it's sort of a whatever floats your boat kind of thing. It's not a make or break or, you know, with any situation though. However, ooh, pardon me. But when people make a decision on whether to hang their microphone up or down, I want them to make the decision because of the right reasons and not because their tube microphone's gonna fucking explode if they, you know, have it just, you know, pointed up, you know? Now, outside of that though, I think that kind of covers recording vocals. Or actually, here's the one. Let's actually talk about really quickly, I guess the sort of psychology of like recording vocals, or like if you're working with a vocalist. Something that's really important is comfort. Whatever makes the vocalist more comfortable is going to help with a better vocal delivery. One of the most important things that you can do for this is having good monitoring. Having good and low latency monitoring is going to be essential for vocalists being able to hear themselves and get a good vocal delivery. Because when we're speaking just like normally out in public, just, you know, shooting the shit or whatever, we hear our own voice in our heads, you know? And as a result, we could hear ourselves and we know how to modulate our voice, you know? It's one of the reasons why people who are deaf don't speak, even though they, you know, they can if they want to. It's that it's hard for them to modulate their voice or to, you know, properly enunciate their words and their tone and stuff when they can't hear themselves. And then, you know, it's a subtle thing that we all do like all the time. Like for instance, you know, and you know, blah, 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 gender, blah, blah. Whenever guys are growing up, you know, they're treated with a lot more respect whenever they have a lot of low end. They have a deep and authoritative voice like this. You know, they're treated with a lot more respect. And, you know, same thing with like girls. If like, you know, they have like a more softer, sultry, feminine kind of voice, it's treated as, you know, more attractive and, you know, guys like them more and stuff. It's just like subtle gender things that happen to us when we're like growing up. And as a result though, you know, and these are just a couple of the ways that like we subconsciously modulate our voice without really even thinking about it. And in the same way though, when we're listening to our like, when, you know, if we're just like singing just normally, I can hear myself. I know if I'm on pitch, off pitch, too high, too low, if I need to pronunciate my words more or whatever. But with your hearing compromised where, you know, you can't hear your own head, you can't hear like, you know, in your head, you know, like you can't really hear yourself properly when you have headphones on. It's important as a result to be able to hear yourself clearly through the monitoring system, that you know how your voice sounds, and as a result, you can change your voice, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, there's some simple stuff like, you know, just give the dude some fucking water if he's like thirsty, you know. If the person, you know, if they got a lot, if they're very dry and you can't hear a lot of the pronunciation of their words, it could be from, you know, them just having a dry mouth. So, you know, you can like give them something like a moist food to eat, like let's say like a crisp apple or something like that. That's also a good way to help with that as well. But just like, you know, a glass of water or something, that goes a long way too. Also, another thing about comfort is if they even want to do it in the tracking room. Because a lot of vocalists, just because of comfort, or maybe they're not too familiar with the source level, so they want to have an easier way to communicate to the producer or the engineer that's working on the project, is that they want to do the vocals in the control room. And this is not like a deal breaker or anything like that, though. You can still get some good vocals having done that. I record all my vocals for my project, all notes, with the microphone, the vocal microphone, in the control room, just because it was easier for me. And for singers, that could be the same thing. A cute little trick, if you're ever recording a vocal and the vocalist wants to be in the control room, but they want to hear their sound from the monitors, what you can do is, if you have, you get two microphones that are completely identical, and you run them through, two channels of the same preamp and the same outboard gear, like compressors or whatever, just have all the settings exact, okay? And but the only difference is that one of the microphones is in phase, and then you flip the polarity of the other one. The other microphone is out of phase, and you have them placed like, have them like one be like right mouth, like right at level with the vocalist mouth, and then have another one like 6 inches below, like sort of aimed at like their neck or like their upper chest. And you can have this one being in phase and this one out of phase. And when you play back sound from the speakers, since these microphones are out of phase, or they cancel each other out from sounds that are far away, you won't get any feedback loop or feedback sounds from the speakers in those microphones. But the vocalist, the sound of the vocal hitting this microphone is going to happen a lot faster than it will the lower microphone. So you'll still be able to record the vocals and hear them clearly, and he'll be able to clearly hear themselves, but you won't have any feedback loop or anything bad like that happen in the control room, which is a cute little trick as well, which could also help in the comfort of the singer too. If they're just not super comfortable with being in a tracking room by themselves with some headphones on, this could be an easy way to get some good vocals. Man, why the fuck did I wrap up that script? Could have been some really helpful information on here. God damn it, Samantha. I think that's it. I think that's it. I'm going to go and record some vocals. I'm going to play them back, and I want you, whenever you're listening to these vocals, I want you to try to listen to what sounds most flattering to you. I want you to listen to, for whenever I'm singing, whatever vocal delivery I'm giving, or the sound of my voice, see what matches up and pairs with it very well. Listen to all the different and interesting tonal qualities there are from one microphone to the other. It's also something that's really important is with this test, I want you to build up your sound palette. I want you to listen to what you think a good vocal should sound like. What is the limitations, or like how large can like how good can a vocal sound, because a lot of these are some really nice high-end microphones, and so you'll be able to get a good listen to on what a really good, nice sounding vocal delivery should be, and compare it to some of the cheaper options around here as well, and see which one's like, hey, that one doesn't sound that bad, or this one sounds kind of close to this microphone, and blah 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 blah. Hello there. What was it? I apologize for the what's it called? The in-camera audio right now, but I just wanted to reiterate really quickly though a couple of small things. One, this is all going through the same preamp. It's a Millennia HV3, and second, I'm going to be moving this little pop filter around from take to take. I'm just going to record them all at one time and then just kind of move the pop filter as I go on. But just a quick little small rundown on pop filters, just while I'm here. Something really cool about pop filters is that the cheap ones actually work the best. There's a lot of problems that come from some of the more expensive pop filters that you see. One of the more common ones is a metal pop filter. I think they're called like Steadyman style or something like that. but basically it looks like almost like a gate weaving of like a fence, like metal kind of weaving through, and there's like a really like there's a lot of holes in between the weaves of the metal. And there's a couple problems with that inherently. One is that if you have a lot of expensive or old vintage microphones, eventually you will have spit that from over time will cake the capsule, and eventually it'll cause it to stop working, which is a a big no-no. Eventually the spit will cause the capsule just to short out on you, which is very bad. And while there are some advantages to that kind of design, one, there's no inherent high frequency loss, which is really good. There's also maybe the biggest problem that I don't like about them is that they ring. They're made of metal, so metal has a resonance to it. If you very easily with like your knuckle or something hit something that has metal and just kind of rasp your finger on, kind of give it a good old thud, you can hear that it makes a note very faintly if you put your ear up to it. And as a result, it causes certain frequencies or like certain notes that a singer hits to be accentuated more than they were supposed to be. And I just inherently just don't like that. I think it's quite annoying. But with the other designs of pop filters, though, there are some other problems with them, especially with some of the more fancier ones. Because a lot of times they introduce new problems that simple old, nylon, cheap pop filters never had. They start to create like comb filtering and all these other things that are just really annoying to deal with. Nothing has really beaten the versatility of just like, this either making your own just from like pantyhose or like cheap nylon, just a simple 2-layer sheet of or 2-layer like just a simple 2-layer fabric of like nylon or pantyhose, just putting over like some plastic or wooden ring. Those materials are important, plastic or wood, because they don't ring, unlike metal. So, but I find that if you don't want to make yours yourself, if you just go to like a Guitar Center or someplace online and you find like a cheap $5-10 pop filter, they're usually made of plastic and they're usually just a very cheap nylon, which works really well. It's a good compromise between moderate high frequency loss and spit protection that I think that other designs don't promise. Of the spectrum of like high frequency loss and proper, of like spit protection and high frequency loss versus no spit protection and no high frequency loss. I think the cheapest pop filters hit a nice compromise in between that other pop filters of other designs don't necessarily do. So the cheap ones are the good ones. Don't worry about it. Also, a good test, if you want to hear these differences yourself, it's a very simple one. It's super simple. All you have to do is take the pop filter and simply place it over your ear while listening to music from your speaker setup or wherever. And there you go. You'll hear what it does to your ear. You'll hear the high frequency loss or the accentuation of notes or this or that, whatever. If you really want to hear the difference between one pop filter or another, it's a dead simple test that I really enjoy doing. So there you go. I'm now going to do all this vocal bullshit. Alrighty. I'm going to sing Akira because there's not many lyrics and it's a very simple song. So here we go. Hi. Akira, Gamira, oh, 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 Nakira, Akira, Gamira, oh, 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 away now, away now, away now, away now, away now, away now, Akira, away now, away now, away now, away now, away now, away now, Nakira, Akira, Gamira, oh, oh, oh. Nakira, Akira, Gamira, oh, 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 Nakira, Akira, Gamira, oh, 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 Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. I killed her. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. And I killed her. I killed her. Got me down. Oh, oh, oh. And I killed her. I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. And I killed her, got me down, oh, oh, oh. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. I killed her, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. And I killed her, got me down, ooh, oh, oh. And I killed her, got me down, ooh, oh, oh. And I killed her, got me down, oh, oh, oh. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. I killed her. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. And I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. I killed her, got me down, oh, oh, oh. And I killed her, got me down, oh, oh, oh. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. I killed her. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. And I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. And I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. I killed her. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. And I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. And I killed her, got me down, oh, oh, oh. And I killed her, got me down, oh, oh, oh. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. I killed her. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. And I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. And I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. And I killed her. Got me down, oh, oh, oh. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. I killed her. Way now, way now, way now, way now, way now, way now. And I killed her. Got me down, oh,
That is it.
oh,
End of the video bullshit here. Okay, so yeah. I'm breaking the fourth wall here. I still haven't actually recorded those vocals, but I'm gonna do the outro. Body blah blah.
It's the outro time, baby. It's the outro of the video. What do I do when I'm outroing a video? I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you. Like and comment and subscribe and give me money on Patreon and my Substack and my OnlyFans and my Furfinity account and like me and follow me on DeviantArt and follow me on Twitter, retweet me, call me a bigot, and then unfollow me. Do all of those things, please. They help my algorithmic growth, baby. Because I'm in the content grind. We're in the content grind arc, baby. It's the 21st century. You want to get big on the internet. You have to monetize all your hobbies and interests. Nothing is sacred to you. You have to give it away. Nothing. You can't have any sacred memories. Everything is to be consumed. You have to film and record yourself doing everything, monetize everything. No interest or hobby you can have can be unmolested. Nothing is sacred. Content. Everything is content. 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 Oh, my back. Oh, this joke was not worth it. Oh. Hey, ring that bell. I'm too fucking old to make jokes like this. Ow. My body. My aching body. Oh, fucking God. Never grow old. Never grow old. I'm too fucking old for this. I'm 25. It's like the actual oldest age ever recorded in human history. No one's ever been older than 25, all right? 23, you're fucking babies. 22, you're literal toddlers pooping in your Pampers. 63, you have so much life ahead of you, all right? You're barely touching life, all right? 72, you still got so much ahead of you. You're so young. 25, just go put yourself in the fucking dirt, all right? There's nothing left for you. You've wasted your entire life. Go rot and die. This is why the most truest thing ever said was that one joke from Undertale, where the fast food worker says, I'm 19 years old and I've wasted my entire life. I felt that for every single year since being 19. I don't know what that says about me.